How's it going out there, folks? Welcome back here to a Sunday night. 3-day weekend is upon us. Hope everyone's having a good afternoon or a good evening here. It's about 11:42 p.m. here, California time, May 26, 2024. Latest activity here on the Earthquake 3D Globe just does show some earthquake activity into the Southern California region with a 1.5. Now, we did see a little bit of activity here stirring up in the last hour with looks like a three-pointer coming in here, 3.5 just outside of the Borrego Springs area. That is on the southern, well, there's a couple segments here that run through the mountain ranges. It may be on a section of the Elsinore Fault or a segment of the San Jacinto Fault Zone. There's a couple different segments that run in between these two fault zones. So there's a little bit of earthquake activity stirring up out here in the last hour. Also up north here into the Rancho Cucamonga area. So somewhat elevated earthquake activity stirring up here in the last couple hours in Southern California. We'll continue to watch that. Of course, all this earthquake activity stirring up following today's larger events there with a 6.6 into the Tonga area. Roughly about an hour later, we did see some surface adjustment taking place here at the subduction zone interface level itself with a 5-pointer. And the latest one over here, a 5.2 over around the Papua New Guinea area. But overall, we need to watch this region around the Tonga Trench. We've been watching a lot of deep activity here recently, about 500-600 kilometers deep. Today, a little bit further upstream, 100 kilometers deep there for that 6.6. That's still fairly deep into the subduction zone. And with this 5-pointer occurring shortly thereafter, that just tells me right there that things are quite strained here across this area of the Tonga Trench. So this little horseshoe bend that you see in the plate boundary needs to be watched here for some further large-scale activity, because a 6.6 is very minimal in terms of what they can see on a large-scale event. There's that 5.2 around Papua New Guinea. It looks as though things have definitely been stirred up here following the activity yesterday with that 6-pointer out here into the Vanuatu area. That 6.3 stirred things up. Looks like it set a domino, a trail of domino effect earthquakes out here across the Pacific and other areas around the globe. 5-pointer coming into the China area. Bunch of earthquake activity here around the Nepal region, Himalayas, and up into the Middle East. Quite a bit of deeper activity around the Mediterranean as well. That looks like it may have triggered some movement across the Morocco area here into the Strait. A 4.1 coming in. Overall, deep activity has been on a broad scale scheme of things out here recently. So we got to watch it. Definitely putting some things into motion out here, it looks like. Deep activity into the South America region again. 2.5 into the Middle American Trench. More deep activity there underneath the, looks like the Ecuador, maybe Colombia area here with that 4.8 earthquake right there. 155 kilometers deep coming in within the last 2 hours or so. So things definitely stirring up out here, folks. Let's see what we got for some closer activity here of the California region. Now, an area obviously we have to watch is the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault. We are seeing a little bit of migrational pressure here off of the plate boundary into the North American side here of the plate boundary. Of course, the plate boundary here in the red. There's numerous branches and fracture zones here that fracture off of the plate boundary itself. And this region is quite strained, let me tell you. It's been over 300 years since we've seen a full rupture here of the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault, and it's capable of producing an 8.1 earthquake. 300 years. I mean, really. 300 years, that's many generations, many achievements, many, you know, there's a lot that has changed and passed since the last 300 years. So all that accumulation is building up here. No doubt that will be coming up here in the future for an event in our, I feel it's going to be in our lifetime. A couple earthquakes up around the Ridgecrest area. Northern California, a handful of smaller quakes, really nothing big going on. couple smaller quakes up into the Cascadia subduction zone. Let's double check that, see what we got for the tremor activity out here. A little bit elevated. 482 epicenters of tremor, mostly into the Northern California area. Now that explains, though, why we've seen elevated tremor activity here today. Over the last 24 hours, we did see some movement stirring up into the Blanco fracture zone. That was a 3.3. And then we did see some activity in the divergent zone, the spreading seafloor center here. You can see the ridges being formed due to the separation of the seafloor. And some activity here a little bit later following this movement in Northern California, just off the coast of Northern California. All this activity putting a strain here on the southern end of the Cascadia subduction zone. So therefore, the tremor is quite heightened up here today. So we've got to watch that, right? Got to watch the southern end or the Cascadia as a whole. But more than likely, with all the recent ongoing events here and the odd tremor activity, I think we'll see more of a likelihood of a partial rupture here of the Cascadia subduction zone, which is quite possible. Talking about 8.1 or maybe up to an 8.5 here in terms of the subduction zone just off the Northern California and Southern Oregon coast. That in itself would be pretty damaging, but not quite as damaging as a full rupture with a 9.0 or greater. But look at Southern California just lighting up out here. So got to watch that. Texas area still seeing some movement in terms of earthquake activity. The big island of Hawaii, see what's going on here with the movement out here. Doesn't look like anything has been stirred up in terms of the movement that's been taking place out here throughout the last 24 hours. Pacific plate has been quite heightened, but it looks as though things are coming down here in terms of deflation. This is actually really suspicious looking in terms of how it's drawn here on the map. This almost looks too steady to be a natural event. I don't know if they're maybe messing around with the graphs here, but this looks a little odd. It's too smooth in terms of the deflation. It almost looks like it was drawn in here. But we'll continue to watch that. Either way, inflation is quite high here across the Kilauea volcano. Earthquake activity, not so much, but we'll continue to watch that as we're noticing a little movement event, earthquake activity event stretching out towards the Loihi Seamount offshore here of the big island. I did see some activity also up into the Kuril-Kamchatka, 121 kilometer deep, 5.2. Major subduction zone here, very capable of producing a mega quake, and it's been a little while since we've seen any mega quake activity here on the Kuril-Kamchatka. Of course, 2011, the 9.0 out here in the Japan Trench, not necessarily associated with the Kuril-Kamchatka. This in itself can produce some big earthquakes. So we're seeing some continued deep activity here, and a lot of deep activity in general following this movement, this earthquake down here into the Tonga region. It looks like things have stirred up out here quite nicely. So it's definitely kicking up here. Across the area of China, latest one shows a 5.1. Much further over here off the plate boundary, there's a little bit of activity north of Nepal with a 4.4. Either way, this activity following that earthquake movement here earlier this afternoon. A handful of earthquakes there across the Mediterranean as well. And definitely looking pretty crazy out here right now. The Atlantic Ocean pretty quiet though. Let's see what we got here for the earthquake 3D globe. Nothing showing up there across the Atlantic. So let's go check out the Iceland activity here real quick, where we're looking at, we're getting a little elevated out here across the rift zones, across the entire rift zones out here across Iceland. The area of interest here, Iceland, definitely, or Grindavik area, still showing some interesting activity here with a swarm of movement underneath the area. Got to watch this because we are quite heightened underneath this area in terms of the eruption, or the eruption potential. Just doesn't look like we're seeing it yet, but it's coming up soon. We'll see if they put out an update here tomorrow. Not really concerned about the Campy Flegrei region right now. But the Icelandic Met Office here, need to watch this. We'll see if we get an update tomorrow, because this is the inflation chart. Let me go back here. This is the inflation chart showing that our current level is probably by now matching or exceeding the previous level event. So it's just a matter of time, folks. A matter of time before we see another eruptive event or a magma intrusion area somewhere. The webcams out here from Live from Iceland look quite cloudy. A little bit of rain out there. No signs of an eruption at the surface, but I guarantee you there's a lot going on subsurface areas. All right, what else we got here for space weather activity? Notice over here across the southeastern limb, look at that. Our old friend, right? I'm going to remember this because this is a source that gave me my first aurora event here in Northern California. We've seen numerous X-flares, numerous large CMEs produced from this massive sunspot back when it was 3664. It's taken a full trip around the far side of the sun, and it's coming up upon us again. We're just getting the first glimpse of it here. It does look quite active with the magnetic arches and lines here. Going to have to watch this pretty closely. Let me see if we got a glimpse of it on the magnetic image here. Doesn't quite look like it. Really can't tell much from this area. But here in the coming days, we'll get a better perspective of if it's still possible to see some stronger flaring from this sunspot. And, of course, it will come around with a new name. Not for sure what it's going to be. It could be 35 or 3696, maybe 3697 potentially. But I guess we'll see when they name that sunspot. It's not a new sunspot. Obviously, it's a former sunspot, 3664, the culprit. Many X-flares here recently. So things are kicking up, and it does look like it's currently flaring with some C-flare activity. That's why we're noticing a little bit of elevated activity here on the DRAP map, which is centered over the sun, the Earth-facing side, where the sun is centered. So, yeah, we'll continue to watch that. Overall threat right now shows about 99% chance for a C-flare, M-flare at 40, but I guarantee you these things are going to go up here, I think, when that sunspot comes back into view. Also, a couple different prominences out here. Plasma areas that look like they could be potentially getting ready to lift off. We'll have to watch that pretty closely. You can see them here on the UV filter quite nicely as well. There's numerous ones here. A lot of times these in themselves erupt, so we'll watch that. Look at that. Even on this image here, you can see it quite nicely. So I have a feeling we're going to be getting back into some very interesting times here in terms of elevated space weather activity. We'll continue to keep an eye on it. Storm Prediction Center, continued noisy night out there across portions of the Midwest. Headed off to the East Coast. Still got some tornado and wind, hail, and hail threats as well tonight. For the day tomorrow, for Monday, well, this is on Tuesday here. Let me go back here. There we go. For Monday, looks like most of that severe weather shifted further off into the eastern coast area, eastern seaboard. Wind, hail, and a little bit of tornado threats as well. For the day on Tuesday, it looks like severe weather ramps back up here in Texas for some tornado, wind, and hail potential as well. So it's a never-ending cycle of severe weather right now. It can't last forever. We'll definitely continue to watch it. In the meantime, folks, keep an eye here on Southern California. Definitely looks like Southern California wants to kick back up here in terms of earthquake activity once again. That 3.5, while it's not a big earthquake, it's in the area there of Southern California, right? And, of course, Southern California in general needs to be watched here for some larger movement because it's well overdue. Not only is the San Andreas Fault here, the southern segment, well overdue, but many other areas out here are well overdue in terms of stress and accumulated slip rate out here in the region. So we'll continue to watch that. Right now, the seismograph stations there look pretty quiet for now. We'll catch you guys back out here in the morning for the Monday morning update. Have a good night, folks. We'll catch you guys later. Stay safe out there.